and Seneca's letters specifically talking about suicide, and Suetonius and Tacitus. Yeah. So,
Tacitus.
Does anyone want to start with similarities or differences that they noticed between these two? Or if you just want to talk about the ones that you read? Yes.
I mean, an obvious difference is that both of these center around female characters, unlike every other text ever.
There's some examples in the Hebrew Bible that focus on women.
I mean, Ruth,
Like what?
Ruth, that's one of the
but
major
like
ones.
literally they just pick which guy they want to help them.
I mean, these aren't really empowered females either.
I mean,
They're more empowered.
They're fucking killing it with this character stuff. I'm sorry. They like had a following. That's cool.
Yeah. They're very focused on their duties.
Yeah, that's true.
I like noticed a difference on or in Facts of Thecla, page 10. And what was that called? 45. Section 45. On the last page it says, and there came a voice out of heaven saying, "Fear not, Thecla, my true servant, for I am with you. Look and see where an opening has been made before your board there shall be for you an everlasting house, and there you shall obtain shelter." I thought it was very it was different than like God was talking directly to her, and that was very different from what we just read in the New Testament.
That's very Old Testament.
Yeah. So I missed that.
I thought one things that was different between Thecla and Perpetua and Felicitas, those two stories, is how, at least in the prologue, when they showed this, Perpetua and Felicitas, section 1, talks about how like the purpose of the Holy Spirit, and the first sentence is, "These are kind of about the fate of ancient times, or proof of God's favor and achieved by his spiritual strengthening in that as well." Not the more recent examples we set down that contribute equally at both ends. So this is speaking to an audience, I guess. It seems like that doesn't sense God's presence or activity like it was in just this time or a couple centuries ago, since this is in 2 or 3 CE, it says, in Carthage. So I thought just the main purpose of this one was talking about how God still has supernatural actions in their lives in that time, as well as how it was back then. And then with Thecla, though, it's more about, I think, centered on, as it says, in like the prologue, the whole intro, evidence for the kinds of stories told about ascetic Christian women. So it's like empowering feminine characters, and more centered on that. The purpose of Perpetua and Felicitas.
With that quote, I thought it was interesting that like the deeds recounted about the faith in ancient times, so on and so forth. I thought it was interesting that like they still maintain the apocalyptic mindset, even though they've read the Gospels obviously, and those Gospels were written with like the idea that like the apocalypse was coming like relatively soon, and now a couple hundred years later, it's like they're still expecting the apocalypse and they're still operating under that assumption, which I thought was interesting.
Do you think they did read the Gospels?
Yeah.
Another form of media.
I don't know how widespread, they were written at that time, but I honestly don't know how widespread the Gospels were.
Well, I'm sure that's some shit.
I mean, by Christian families, I'm sure they knew certain teachings, but if they knew specifically the Gospels, I mean, I honestly, that's not something I know.
This is just to backtrack to Zach's point, and I found this a similar thing in both of these writings, and in Perpetua Spectral and Felicitous, I found that they were putting more of an emphasis on the supernatural abilities of God, whereas in Thecla, in section 6, it says, "Blessed are those who respect the word of God, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are those who have received the wisdom of Jesus Christ," etc. And it kind of, to me, it focused more on what people using the word of God to do, like what they would do instead of just the word of God directly.
I found kind of a similarity between the Perpetua Felicitous and the Seneca's letters pertaining to suicide. So Seneca, letter 70, section 28, he said it was wrong to live by violence, but was wanted to die by violence, and he also says that life holds no one against their will. And when it was talking about how Perpetua died, it says she took the trembling hand of the young gladiator and guided it to her throat. It was as though so great a woman feared she was that the human spirit could be dispassionate unless she herself were willing. So I kind of thought those two things kind of like that's pretty neat.
Sorry,
As far as differences in, we were talking about how like it sounds more like the Old Testament God is kind of presented. On page 4, section 17, Paul is preaching kind of about the Old Testament God because he says, Paul lifted up his voice and said, "Today I'm interrogated as to what I teach, then listen for counsel. The living God, the God of vengeance, the jealous God, the God who has need of nothing, has sent me since he wants for the salvation of humanity, that I may draw them away from corruption and impurity." And in Romans, like in the New Testament, we see Paul a lot preaching about how if people worship idols and people don't accept his word, they're foolish. And God isn't really reaching out to them. Like he wants them to follow them, but if they don't see his way, then they're missing out. You know, they're living in death. And that's also supported in Exodus, where God is seen as jealous. Exodus chapter 20, verse 4. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am the jealous God. So.
Yeah, and kind of going along with that, in Thecla 22, they talk about God and compassion produce a noise below the earth and a cloud above full of water, and hail overshadowed the theater, and all of its contents poured out, so many were in danger and died. That goes back to, like, so God and compassion, and then at the same time, he instilled fear and, provoked death. And then I also kind of wanted to go back to Seneca, but
I was just wondering what.
oh, that's what 22. Yeah. But then we go back to Seneca, letter 65. He says, "I'm greater than that, and born for greater things than to be captive with my body." And I think these female characters, even though they are interested in their virginity, there is definitely, I think, a liberation of their body, because they aren't subject to the fire, or I mean they are, but like their bodies are saved. So it's this weird like the female connection to the body, I guess. To me, it seemed like they were being liberated, which goes back to what Seneca was saying, that they're not captive to their body or the world, which is one of Jesus' goals.
Oh, I also want to bring up a different point. I thought it was interesting, like, especially, I guess this is like a similarity between the New Testament and sometimes we talk about it. Like, there seems to be an increased emphasis on, like, the idea of salvation and everlasting life, and the salvation that God can bring. At the very end of the book, it says, "Look and see where everybody has a made for you, for there shall be for you an everlasting house, and there you shall obtain shelter." And then all the way back up in section 2. But it was like what he was saying about like believe in God and like his compassion will save you, or like you will obtain salvation. And I thought that was an interesting idea that became increasingly present in the New Testament and emphasized there more than it was in the Old Testament about the idea of faith as providing everlasting salvation for you. And so I thought that was interesting. That was
I found it interesting that this was obviously written after the Bible, or the stuff that we read in the Bible, and how they're trying to provide examples of at that time, modern day like God intervention from God, because in both the New Testament and the Old Testament, if you had faith in God, then God would through Christ, God would perform miracles for you, or in the Old Testament, God would show you He was there. He talked to the different prophets and stuff. So this is kind of a modern day at that time example of that God hasn't just gone away. He's still there. He's still helping out the faithful. Anyone else? More comments?
What are the texts we're supposed to pay it to besides the gospel?
Everything you've read.
Yes. Yeah. Homeric poems, Hebrew Bible, Aeneid, Acts, Seneca's letters, and 20th and still can't pronounce
Tacitus.
Tacitus. Does anyone want to talk about Homeric poems versus this? Because it's different kind of God. So I think that's interesting.
I mean, this god is definitely more similar to the Homeric gods, like the god depicted in. Where's the one that it rains and it's like
Tekla. That's Tekla.
okay. Like that is a direct intervention, through I can't find the exact paragraph, but you know what I'm talking about. That's a direct intervention, something that would have been very similar, like when Zeus calmed the ocean. Or not Zeus, Jupiter, or when Athena, interfered directly. These are things that generally the God in the New Testament doesn't get directly involved. But this time he did.
Yeah, adding on to that, when Thecla was about to be presumably raped by this group of people, she prayed to God and asked that God save her again, and God replied and said, "If you're not Thecla, my true servant."
Where are you, Will?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in the Acts of Thecla, page 10, last section, 45. My apologies, on the very last page. If you're not Thecla, my true servant, for I am with you. Look and see where an opening has been made before for there shall be you an everlasting house, and there you shall obtain shelter. So, that seems pretty direct.
In relation to the Aeneid, in regard to Camilla, a female hero, in the Aeneid versus Cleopatra and Felicitas, female heroes in this story. I kind of saw that Camilla had this, as a hero, she had her heroic attributes were very much like heroic attributes you found in a man in the Aeneid, whereas Cleopatra and Felicitas had distinctly female attributes to their heroism, which I thought was interesting. Felicitas had Lucas birth. Yeah. He came up in a month early in prison, and then nothing else. And mother now. Yeah.
Also, a big focus on that virginity. You were saying.
Yeah.
That's the big emphasis, at least in Thecla. They're actually both not virgins, since they both given birth. Which I thought was interesting in comparison to Thecla. But the reference back to Will's point about not living by violence, but dying by violence is something noteworthy, as Seneca was saying. This is what from that, it's more just kind of a shared perception with Seneca and Christians, at least with Perpetua and Felicitas. In letter to Vinicius, I think is what his name is, and with Epicurus writing, death is nothing to us, and I think section 29. It's on page 29 in the book that we have. It says how the wise man neither rejects life and fears death. And so I think that really parallels more with Christianity and how they're not really rejecting life, as if it's something I guess, evil, because they think that temptation and sin is really attached to flesh, not necessarily life, I think. So they're not really, like, they're ready to die, but they're not, just, yeah, like saying, like, there's no sanctity in life, just as Epicurus is saying. So he's just saying, you're ready to die in any moment. So neither reject it or fear it.
Yeah, Seneca's in letter 70, he says, death is a harbor never to be rejected, that life is not always worth holding on to. And at this point, like, they're excited to die. Like, in Perpetua Felicitas at 15, they're, like, praying that she goes birth early so she can die sooner, and become a martyr sooner. Not necessarily die, but become a martyr sooner. And so at this point, it's better for them to die and give up their life for God than to live, which parallels to what Seneca was saying, that sometimes it's better to be dead.
Yeah, in section 18 of Perpetua too, it says, the day of their victory dawned, and they marched from the prison to the very quickly, as though they're going to heaven with all faces trembling of it all with joy rather than fear. I think that just like perfectly encapsulates both your points and talking about how they don't really fear death, but rather like they will die in like for God's word. And then also I kind of thought I looked at it also as kind of like a parallel to God's crucifixion. I mean Jesus' crucifixion, and how like it's big how how it's like in public and it's like on his life right over the sea. But like yeah, they do not fear it, and they're ready to like die for the Lord's word.
With regards to like the similarities to like the crucifixion, I also thought it was interesting that like in Perpetua, it says they rejoiced at this, that they had attained a share of the Lord's sufferings, which is like in section 18. And I thought it was interesting that like they want to emulate Christ so much that they like rejoice in being in pain, and like they're excited to die, which seems odd to me. I don't like people agree. Yeah. That's kind of what it is.
Also, what I found very interesting was there was like direct like references to like what heaven would look like for the dreams.
Yeah.
And we definitely have not seen that before, like in the New Testament. And so like this was like a real like first picture of what somebody like thought that heaven was gonna be like. So like it's in section 11 in Perpetua. It talked about how in the gardens there were 4 other angels, more ascended than the others. And 12, it says voices in unison chanting, "Holy, holy, holy," and just like this big description of like what heaven looked like. Before that, we've had like no like description of heaven. So I found that very interesting.
I like the parallel of the dream, how there are dreams in like a lot of the stuff we've read, like in the New Testament where Joseph has a dream that he has to leave, and there are also dreams in a lot of the other stuff we've read that are prophetic, but we haven't necessarily seen like the specific dream about like what heaven would be like.
And I thought it was really interesting that like the first time we see like heaven specifically described as a text that was not the Bible. You know, like I thought that was really interesting. That was, and also like there's like it seems to me that they like the garden that they believe to be heaven, like that seems to me a lot like the garden of Eden.
Yeah, and that was just an interesting thought. Really, when I thought about that, I kind of thought about like well, like when they sin was living in heaven, and they have to go to heaven. And so like was it the garden, like we heaven, and then like whenever Adam said they got to heaven, that's what the surface. I think it's hard for me to read Revelation. Yeah.
I have a quick question about if we knew in Perpetua Felicitas in section 10 the significance of her fourth vision when she's fighting Egyptian is a man, like why it's an Egyptian.
Yeah. Is there like racial animosity there?
Because Carthage is North Africa.
Section 10,
Egypt.
169. Why is it?
So I just didn't know if we had any idea about why an Egyptian, not just say something weird.
Were the Egyptians, I'm sorry, it's way wrong, are the Egyptians the ones that were trying to?
Could it be
They're in
like
Carthage.
that the Egyptians enslaved the Hebrews?
I actually have something about that section. We can have a comparison to the Old Testament. Okay, so same section that Zach brought up, and if you have the Old Testament, it's the book of Esther, chapter 7. So we haven't covered Esther, so I'll give like a very brief description. Esther was a concubine to King Ahasuerus in what would probably be Persia. And one of the, she was Jewish, obviously it's the Old Testament. And one of the, like King Ahasuerus, his highest consultant wanted to kill all the Jews, including her uncle who raised her. And she, similarly to the way Perpetua fights to protect her people, the group of Christians, she's fighting not physically but diplomatically to protect the Jews of the land that, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the land that she's from. And she does so like through deceit, and it's an example of probably one of the most powerful women in the Bible. And I thought that it's a similarity and a difference because they're both fighting, just one's using their hands and one's using their minds, which that's also what a woman in in ancient texts is being depicted as how smart women.
But these are radically different. These are radically different, okay? Perpetua and Felicitas want to die. They want to die, okay? Doesn't that strike you as being very different, as trying to preserve the people?
No.
Because Esther's trying to preserve her people, right? She's
Yeah.
trying to keep them from dying. These want to die.
I still think it's a sacrifice for your people.
Well,
She's risking her life, and so are they.
Well, certainly she's risking her life, but she's risking her life to save the Jews, okay?
For an ideology.
Perpetua and Felicitas, they're not risking their lives to save
But
anybody.
they're risking their life to save their beliefs.
Well, so what's the difference there?
I said there's a difference and a similarity.
Who are they trying to save? Who is Felicitas and Perpetua? Who are they trying to save?
The future Christians. That's what I got from it.
They're,
They're not trying to save themselves.
no, why are they doing this? What is in it for them?
Nothing.
Heaven!
Okay.
They're
I
totally in
thought it
heaven.
was
No,
a relevant comparison.
I appreciate, well, yeah, and there's nothing wrong with bringing up the comparison, but if you bring up the comparison, you've got to be ready to, to argue your point.
Okay.
But these are vastly different situations. Esther is trying to save her people. Perpetua and Felicitas are saying, I want to die. In fact, I don't even care about my kid. Whatever happens, that's not an issue. I gotta tell you, this is a parent's worst nightmare. I just gotta tell you that, okay, as a parent. This is a parent's worst nightmare.
That your kid would be?
That your child is so intent on dying that she's gonna give up her child, hurry so I can give her so I can die. And, her father is just unbelievably beside himself. Just imagine yourself as a father and your daughter is intent on dying. There's nothing, and why is that? Why is she so intent on dying? It's the heavens. So what is vastly different, and I'm glad you brought this up because this really raises a really important point. What is vastly different between what we see these people doing and anyone else that you've seen before?
Yes, it's more selfish.
They're saving these options to help themselves before they want to.
The Epicureans, what about death for them? What does death mean for the Epicureans? You brought this up.
Death of the soul.
There is no soul. There is no.
Yeah, there's no afterlife.
No, there's no afterlife at all. There's no afterlife. The Senate you brought up, let's see, Zach brought up, or somebody brought up the Seneca, right? Or Will brought up Seneca. What's the difference there?
Well, Stoics do believe in a sort of afterlife. Seneca didn't.
There's an, but what is that afterlife?
Well,
Constitute.
your soul.
The soul continues, right?
Yeah,
It's a sort of energy that recombines with the rest of the sort of thing, right? And it's the, and what about Plato? You go through a process, or let me, one that's more familiar to you, the Aeneid. What happens in the Aeneid? You go into the underworld, and you get recycled, and you come back, right? Theoretically, okay, some after 1,000 years or whatever it is, okay, you come back, right? Is the afterlife in any of those versions a good place to be? No. So what is fantastically different about this? You want to die. Not you can't commit suicide, right? But to have somebody kill you for this, wow. What could be better?
What?
What?
She kind of kills herself. a little.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of suicide.
I mean, she was gonna die. Yeah, I agree. She did her. She
Yep.
did end up killing herself, but she was the guy was chopping off.
I mean, also kind of willingly going into like this situation. I mean, like Perpetua like did the whole thing herself, but even Felicitas, thank you. She was like, I want to be in this situation where I know I'm gonna die. So that I would consider that suicide.
Well, no, yeah. I mean, she's not taking her life, right? But
Like
she is she's putting herself in a situation where someone will take her life, certainly.
So could you make the argument that the kind of like really developed like Christian view of heaven would promote more of a selfishness because people are looking now to die and have less of a regard for what remains on earth and what they leave behind, and instead are more focused on, I guess, their own well-being in the afterlife.
But they don't just want to like die to die. It's I guess the dying is acceptable if they do it through the virtue of spreading the word of Christ.
Yeah.
Doing so which gets promotes that cause, not just kind of
Like,
well,
might be like,
yeah, it's not just like, hey, we go to something in the afterlife. It's obviously you want to spend as much time on earth spreading the word as possible because that's their job, I guess. But if they have to die, I guess the most noble way of dying would be to die in doing so, spreading the word of their cause.
There seems to be like a lot of like noble acts that require like a lot of suffering. I guess that's what we've been talking about. It just seems like, I don't know, it's just like really interesting to me. Like there's the one part where they were fasting for 6 days, and a little boy was like, "I'm starving. I haven't eaten for 3 days and 3 nights, or however long it was." And like finally, it took that long for Paul to say, "Okay, go sell my coat and buy bread." And it just seems like there's like a lot of like unnecessary suffering in the name of spirituality, in my opinion.
Yeah, I guess they just saw it as more noble.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw that in the. I don't have the Bible for you. We saw that in the New Testament. That these people like the apostles. They were like Peter would continually talk about like suffering for God and how that made Paul's letters would always talk about like suffering for God and how that makes it more noble and more worthwhile and how we should follow that. So I guess that's something like the idea of it.
And also in regards to Perpetua and Felicitas's kids, with Perpetua, I mean, I don't, in the scope of like their understanding, it doesn't seem as like really selfish in a sense, like for them, because they're seen as if they're both an child. So it's like in section 6, because up until section 6, Perpetua is worried the whole time about her baby. She needs to be nursed. And, so my baby, I got used to being nursed at the breast and staying with me in prison, so I sent the deacon to go ask for the baby. My father refused to give him over. But as God will be the baby, I had no further desire for the breast, nor did I suffer any inflammation. So I was relieved of any anxiety from my child, and the days discomfort in my breast. So I mean, she knows her father's also taking care of the child as well. And even though she knows she's bleeding yet, I mean, I think she, in her sense, as long as there's a caretaker to raise the child, that's sufficient enough. Don't Felicitas, all the details we give about her child is that the group of them pray in section 15, and she gave birth to a girl, and one of the sisters brought her up as her own daughter, whether she knew that or not. In the scope of like us seeing the selfish versus their perspective on salvation in heaven, what really matters, not just this life, but what really matters is after this. It's hard to get some connotation.
I think that their asceticism, is that the correct word? I think they're just following Jesus' example because, like, if you look at everything that they're doing, it's just kind of like in a feminine context, I guess. You know, like, what would Jesus do kind of thing? I mean, obviously, like, it's completely different. We were talking about how he was crucified and all of his suffering. You know, they fasted for 6 days and he fasted for 40. So they're just doing their best to emulate Jesus. I like in Perpetua and Felicitas on section 15, she says, "But I'm suffering now, I suffer by myself, but then the Lord who is inside me, he will suffer for me, just as I shall be suffering for him." So yeah, it's like suffering for Christ, it's suffering for what you put out into the world and what you put out children. So I don't know. I didn't see that as total neglect necessarily. In some cases, yes, but like, I don't know. It's all about emulating Christ. Like kids are kind of on track territory. Anyways, okay.
Let me, because I think, if I may, just a second, because I think, India, you're responding to a comment about that she doesn't really care about her children. Okay, that was probably a little bit too strong. But I do think this is an important point that you make, is that they believe that through what happens to them, other people will benefit. This is a very important thing. You see that in Thecla too, right? That at multiple junctures, as well as, is it Perpetua's or Felicitas's brother? Which one was it? What's that? Is Perpetua's brother. She believes, right, that what she is doing is going to have a direct impact on his life in the afterlife. This is, I cannot underscore to you how ultimately transformative this is. This is off the charts different, okay? You read it in Aristotle and in Nicomachean, that was one of the points of contention. Does our life here influence what happens in the afterlife or vice versa? And, maybe, maybe not. Here, we've got that these martyrs believe that if they suffer, that other people often are going to benefit directly from that. And that's a huge difference in what we're seeing here. So I do think that, we're probably pretty used to this by now, but this is a huge moment when we see this is not the Christianity of Paul, right? This is going well beyond the Christianity of Paul. I mean, Paul set the stage for this, but we're seeing an evolution in their understanding of Christianity and how it works that is radically different. I mean, in the Acts, we see the beginning of this, but this is a subsequent step in the evolution of their ideas about the soul, the afterlife, and all that sort of thing. So that was a little bit too strong to say that no one's going to benefit from it or that they're neglectful, but it's a very different approach. I'm sorry, go ahead, Isabel.
Yeah, going off of that, I found it very interesting in Thecla where she goes with Tryphenia and prays for Tryphenia's daughter who died, and Tryphenia sees her daughter in a dream saying, "Mother, the desolate stranger Thecla you will have in my place in order that she may pray for me and I be translated to the place of righteousness." So Falconia is going to go to heaven through Thecla's prayers, which is something that's not in the Bible at all. That's completely different. You have to believe in Christ during your life to go to heaven. So I found when I was reading that, I was like, what? This is not Christianity. That's weird. But yeah, that's going off what you're saying. I saw a bunch of people with their hands raised.
I just touching back to on the not so much caring for children remark. I think so by accepting death the way that they're doing it by welcoming it, they're putting a lot of faith into God and what's going to happen after, and they're really trusting that. So I mean obviously there's nothing in here that says it, but I feel like if they're putting that much faith into the system like that, then they're probably going to trust God or whoever will take care of their children. Like I feel like if they believe so heavily in what they're doing and that they'll be rewarded for that, I think that it would be natural for them to have like the faith that they're children.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anyone else?
I just have a question, like, would you guys compare so radical radical mode that is on today, like would you do radical? Would you compare like these people to
Like how they, like the guy that in the podcast, those
Yeah.
people, I thought about that too.
The first
About the
podcast.
martyrdom.
The very first
Series
Yes.
that, sorry, you go.
So one thing that's interesting is that both are not like actual versions of their religion. Like this is an extension of Christianity that's not practiced by everyone. And like radical jihadists, that's not like Islam. That's a perversion kind of.
Okay, all right, so I'm going to, what I want you to do, this is a good example, write that down in your journal, okay? Because this is a question that we want to get to, right? Write it down in the journal. Why the Egyptian? What's the issue of the Egyptian? And continue on with that, okay? Look at that. We are going to come to the Quran. We're going to come to the evolution of the Islamic faith. So just keep that in mind. This is a big issue about what I want to look at in terms of this comparison. This is a perfect example of why you've got that journal, okay? To write these questions down and come back to them because they're all good questions, okay? And it's not anything that we can really explore in the context of this one. But you're absolutely, there is, I mean, well, we will get to that one. Let me take a few minutes here at the end, if I may, Isabel. I want to come back and to the observation that Amy introduced, that Anna followed up with, and India, that there is a very strong impulse to emulate Jesus's life. And any opportunity for them to do that is going to be, and you will see that this takes root in the Christian faith. Asceticism is one manifestation of that. Professor Lopez is going to give a presentation, a common session, plenary session on Wednesday, and you will hear about the saints, I mean, the evolution of this notion of asceticism and trying to experience in the most intense way the life of Jesus, to emulate the life of Jesus. So that's a really important observation. I want to come back to what Kristen, because this is a vision of heaven. We haven't had that, right? You know, we've seen the heavens have opened up and stuff like this, but this is the first articulation of what these people believe heaven is like. And it gets to the point that where you raised, you know, what are they, where are they getting this information? What is it that they saw in heaven that was part of that vision? What role did Jesus play?
The answer is either.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the latter pretty much.
Yeah. What did Jesus actually do? What did he do to them? What did they experience?
It was an old guy.
Yeah.
With the face.
I thought it was God.
The whole metaphors of the shepherd, the whole metaphors of nourishment, all of these things are coming out of the text. I mean, these are all things that are animating their understanding of what this is. All right, so one last thing, and this comes back to a couple of things that we've been talking about. It comes back to the issue of suicide and all of that sort of thing. Is that I want you to go back. It won't take you long, but to read at the beginning of Thecla, Paul, in his sermon, gives the Beatitudes, right? What's different about those Beatitudes? They're very different, okay? So Paul was preaching, the end of the world is coming, prepare for it. And that has implications for sexuality, for interpersonal relationships, for wealth, possessions, all of that sort of thing. And now we see the Acts of Thecla, which is written much later. Now Paul's singing a slightly different tune, right? What is happening is that the notion of the kingdom of heaven, people are beginning to say, well, apparently this whole social transformation, the passing of this, so where is that? Well, where is it? Where is the kingdom of heaven now? It's up there. It's not going to come to us. We're going to go to there. Okay. So you can see that they're wrestling with these ideas that were born in the first century, and now they're trying to figure out how do we implement that? How do we live under these circumstances? Thank you, Isabel. Another fine job.